Well, good morning. It's good to be with all of you this morning. We had a very busy week here at St. David's last week as we interviewed a few candidates for our new position of Director of Community Engagement and Advocacy. And so as a part of that process, we spent a good deal of time discussing the needs and the challenges of the city of Austin, but also of the broader world. We talked about the areas that most need justice and resources, and the areas that are particularly important to our life as a parish, given our position here in downtown Austin. If I'm being vulnerable, however, for a moment, I have to admit that it made for a very difficult week. The issues that we discussed are broad and deep and complex. They don't have easy answers, and we don't always even agree on the best approach or solution to responding to them. But one thing becomes perfectly clear during these discussions: God's beloved children are suffering and in pain and in need. We talked about incarceration and inequalities and bias in the justice system. And we discuss recidivism and the problems that are faced as the convicted try to re-enter the workforce and adjust to life outside. We talked about mass shootings and gun control and heard of another mass shooting in New Mexico and the need for yet another prayer table altar outside of St. David's for the victims of gun violence. And I asked too, what does it say about our current situation that we have a prayer table for gun violence always at the ready and near the front door? We discussed Trinity Center and the homeless and the changing downtown landscape of resource providers as the Salvation Army closes and as Arch changes its focus and structure. We talked about the rise of incidences in the sense of unrest and trauma that this has caused to the downtown homeless population. We spoke of political discourse and the harsh division along party lines that exists in the Texas legislature and at the federal level. We spoke of new and existing threats to the LGBTQIA+ community, particularly those who are trans, that are being proposed and also being enacted at the state level. We spoke of immigration and of racism. We discussed our parish efforts to seek racial justice and change, and discussed the current situation at the border. One thing was abundantly clear: the need and the pain and the suffering are overwhelming and would tax any single organization's resources. We discussed prioritization and discernment and how we might plan and strategize our response. We talked about how we can support each other in this work and make the best use of our resources and our gifts. And we talked about our duty as Christians to honor the image of God in all people and to continuously fight for those who are the most vulnerable. And it was in the midst of these discussions that I began preparing this sermon and studying this morning's gospel lesson. And I found there a prayer, a word of intimate and intertwined relationship, and a call for unity among God's people in a divided and a dangerous world. As strange as it may sound, I took some comfort in the reminder that these struggles for justice and for unity and for a safe space within the world are not new. We follow the example and the leadership of generations of God's people who have sought to bring peace and resources to a world that is not always safe and welcoming. I was comforted to hear Jesus' prayer for us who follow in the footsteps of the disciples, trying to make our way in the world. Jesus has ascended, but we are not left alone to do the work of the kingdom in the world. We're invited into the relationship shared between God and Jesus, brought into that love so that we might feel the support needed to sustain us in the world. Jesus prays for unity so that we might experience the Trinitarian love and grace and mercy, even as we might struggle in the world. But I think the call and the desire for unity has a deeper meaning. We're meant to fight against the world's attempts to create division and strife. When the world calls us to other and to differentiate and to label each other, we're reminded that we are called to unity and to love. And as we were discussing the relationship between community engagement and advocacy and the work of the kingdom, one of the candidates that we were interviewing stated that there is nothing more sacred than working together. And her comment struck everyone in the room, and we all remembered it and brought it up later in our discussion. And I think we all needed that reminder, the reminder that we aren't alone in this work, but that we journey with each other, with God, and with those we encounter on our way. We aren't left alone. We're called to see the image and the beauty of God in each other. We must fight the efforts of the world and the legislature to see each other as different, or as less than, or as something to be feared. We are called to unity. Jesus' prayer is a reminder that we are made for relationship and connection, and that we struggle when we are isolated or divided because it's in conflict with our nature. I think that's why we feel this pain when we talk about this work or when we think about our experience during COVID. We're made for relationship and connection and to be with each other. When those bonds are broken, even though we may not know it, we feel that pain and that disconnect. Another candidate asked us this week about our hopes as a staff for the Director of Community Engagement and Advocacy. And I said that I hope that this position would make us uncomfortable and would challenge us to have the hard conversations and to do the sometimes messy and difficult work of the kingdom. I hope that it might help to wake all of us from our COVID slumber and give us new energy and creativity to confront the division in the world, to fight the urge to give in to the walls and the labels that create conflict and injustice and inequity. But most of all, I hope that we might be united in the sacred act of working together for justice. And so I invite you this morning to join with the staff in praying for this new position at St. David's. Pray for discernment. Pray for those in need. Pray for a unity that will push and challenge and stretch us beyond our imagination. Pray for a unity that will help us to see Christ in each other and in those whom the world tells us are different. Pray for discomfort and growth and change. And pray for each other and that we all may be one. Amen.